This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Beane, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Here with us today as well is John Chappelear, a multi-award-winning author, consultant, and speaker of wealth with a wealth of experience. John, it's a pleasure to have you here with us on our show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful for the invitation.
Very good. John, you've mentioned receiving a gift of devastation that changed your life's focus. And could you share a little bit about the transformation that you experienced and how that shifted your perspective on success and the significance?
Absolutely. Well, let's put it. One of the things I talk about is being in recovery, as I'm a recovering big shot, and that's kind of where the concept began. Because when I got out of business school and I started working for other people, and then I decided that's not where I want to be. I want to be in business for myself. I think in business for yourself, there's a certain level of self-confidence that you have to be in business. You guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, you have to really believe in what you're doing to weather all the issues. But sometimes that can get a little carried away. And I think what happened with me is I've always been sort of if 2 is good, then 8 is better than 2. And so for me, it was the self-confidence moved quickly into hubris. And the hubris quickly ran into things being way too important for me to spend time with my family, to spend time with my wife, to go to soccer games, or to go to back to school nights, or to do the kinds of things that I had actually gone into business to do because I had been working for other people, and I was working, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And so I thought, well, if I open my own business, this will be a real different expectation. And what happened to me is after a few years of this, I got my gift of devastation, which is I had spent 10 or 11 years working very hard to build this business so that I could then come back and spend time with my family, only to find that in 1991, the economy switched dramatically, kind of like it did in 2008, 2007, 2008. And the bank decided they wanted all the money that they had loaned me. They wanted it all back. And they gave me about 2 weeks to get it back. And it was a little hard to come up with $5 million off the top of my head. So the business went out of business. And so I had 400 employees in 12 locations. And it was not a very good time to be looking for work because it was an economic downturn. And my hubris was still pretty intact. And I felt like, well, I'm sort of the child prodigy of the industry. I'm sure the phone will be ringing off the hook anytime now. And as I sat and waited and waited and waited and realized that nobody's probably going to call me. And a friend of mine who was a senior placement person said, nobody hires the ex-owner of an entrepreneurial business because you're always going to be a pain in the ass. So for me, it was like, well, then what am I actually going to do? Because I spent all this time. My family really doesn't care about me one way or the other anymore. And my business doesn't either. The phone calls aren't getting returned. The invitations to all the events that I was so welcome to aren't coming in anymore. And all of a sudden, I was kind of the guy sitting on the curb wondering what happened to the wonderkind who had been here for the last 10 or 11 years. And I realized that I was probably putting my focus and importance on the wrong set of principles. And so what I had been struggling for over and over and over again was to be more successful. And as long as it was more, that was the key ingredient. If I was 20% ahead last year, that was all that mattered. And it didn't matter what measurement, as long as it was more. And the thing I learned over time is if more is all I want, then more will never be enough. So it had to be more what versus just more. And what I learned is that it's not success that I should have been striving for. It was significance that I should have been striving for. And that was a real eye opener for me. And I in the 25 years or so, it's been longer than that now, but since that happened, I can't tell you how many executives I've talked to that have, and just people in general who have said, I got this or I had that, I had cancer, I got divorced, I had went bankrupt, things that are dramatic or devastating that happen to you, that if you let them sort of work their way through your process, when you come out the other side, you will be amazed how much different your perspective is and how much more willing you are to try new lessons from new teachers. I sort of think of it as cracking the shell of hubris so a little humility can sort of wander in from time to time. And so for me, it was a horrific experience. I just about anything you could imagine financially that happened. And gratefully, I have a wonderful wife, and we had a new baby son, and so I was able to sort of focus on them for a little while I was getting my feet back on the ground. And I had a lot of the issues that a lot of entrepreneurs have, which is a sort of, now they refer to it as imposter syndrome, which is, oh my gosh, I'm just lucky I got successful, but now I'll never be successful again because it was just luck. And so I opened another business, and it was very successful very quickly, but I was able to build it on a different set of principles so that it wasn't all about me. It was about the people who worked with me. It was about my family. It was about anybody but me. I had already spent a whole lifetime already focused on me, and I was only 40. So as I began the new business, which was a completely different industry, but but using the same basic clients to buy from, or had to buy from me. So I was able to go in and utilize a lot of old contacts to build the business up very quickly, but I wasn't in a competitive market to the business I had sold. So it was interesting and fun. My daughter wanted to come work with me for the first time, and God, I don't know, she was 22 or 23 at the time, and so it was like, hey, let's come on over, Dad, and I want to work together. I was like, wow, you never even wanted to return my phone calls before, and now she wanted to work with me. So for 2 or 3 years, we worked together. Out of the 12 years or so I ran that company, and it was wonderful. I mean, I was able to do things. Like I said, I had a new son, and he was, just 3 or 4 years old. So I was able to come home and spend time with him. The things that I had intended to do initially, but I was focused on success and more, versus this time, which I was more focused on significance and real value rather than just imagined value. The truth was when I sold this company in, I don't know, maybe 2000, I had 100 people call me and say, what are you going to do next? Are you going to do something else? I had nobody call me in 1990. 10 years later, I had a couple of hundred people call me because I was contributing to their successes as well as my own. And so it meant more. It meant more to me. It meant more to them. I was able to feel like I actually was being philanthropic without being selfishly philanthropic. You donate something, but somebody accidentally mentions it to the press that, maybe you might want to write an article about this wonderful guy who's donating all this. When you started doing things that were just because they were for the benefit of someone else, service above self, as they say in Rotary. And it's funny because those were not things, it was always something for something. It was always quid pro quo. I'll give you this, you give me this back. And the more I found that I could give without expectation, the more I got back. It's one of those weird conundrums of, well, I've got to be selfish because otherwise, who's going to protect me? And the interesting thing was, the more I focused on the success of others, the more successful I became. So I was very grateful for that. That I was very unhappy about the learning experience and the pain I had to go through to get there. But I was very grateful. Somebody told me, and right after the company had closed in 1990, I guess, there'll be a time where this bank who caused you so much pain, you're going to be grateful for this behavior. And I thought, that's never going to happen. Never going to happen. And by 2000, I was so grateful that it had happened. I couldn't even believe it. I mean, and I had gone through just what I considered to be everything about my life that was successful was gone. And then as it began to get rebuilt and the principles were different rather than just me and more, it just, I don't know, everything just began. Joseph Campbell has a phrase, which is, if you're following your bliss, doors will open that you didn't even know existed before, and that's kind of what happened to me. I mean, I did a speech that I didn't realize I was going to do. It was for a leadership group that I'd been a member of for probably 15 years in Washington. I grew up in Washington, D.C., by the way. And so this was in Washington. That's where I owned this company. And so a leadership group asked me to come and talk about exactly what we're talking about right now. And at the end of the talk, a friend of mine, who was also an alumni of this group, came up and said, "You got to write a book about this. This is just amazing. This is great stuff. They would love this." So he drags me over to his publisher at Putnam, and Putnam was like, "Yeah, that's great. Let's do that." I'm like, okay, so now I'm not selling stuff anymore. I'm trying to figure out how to become an author. And I was always a talker, but not much of a writer. So it was very overwhelming to be sitting there looking at this little cursor blinking at me on a screen, trying to figure out how to get what I'm saying down. And my agent was very helpful because she said, "Well, then just talk the story, and then give me the tapes, and I'll give them to somebody who can change them from what it sounds like when you speak to what it sounds like when you read. That's easy to do, but getting the ideas out is what's hard." And so that's what I did for about the next year, I guess. And the book came out in 2004, 2005. And I was very grateful because it came out. Putnam published hard copy and a paperback copy, a very successful sales. I was a little frustrated with them because they wanted to sort of turn this into a combination between more of a Christian-focused book and a chicken soup for the soul book. And I really didn't want it to be that. I really wanted it to sort of be inclusive, not let's put a fence down and I'm on this side and you're over here. I wanted it to be, regardless of race, creed, color, national origin, religion, anything, I wanted it to be, if you're struggling with these issues, it doesn't matter what your race, creed, color, national origin, sexual orientation, any of that is. You need to find a process on a daily basis to be able to keep yourself emotionally balanced so that you can actually deal with life on life's terms, because something I never wanted to do. I wanted to sort of imagine what life was like and then deal with that.
All right, so I got a couple of questions based on those things.
Sure.
Your shift that happened because of the everything that happened with the first business, did that just come about kind of naturally, like your shift from more and more focus as opposed to a shift to the significance, the impact that you're making? Was that a natural thing that you just kind of fell into, or was that a purposeful? Like how did that come about?
Well, it was not purposeful, and it was the bank walked in and said, "We want our money back." And I had a 12-and-a-half-year-old company doing about $60 million a year worth of business with 400 employees. And they gave me 30 days to pay them back or close the company. And I couldn't get the money, so the company closed. So it was that dramatic change. It was not having my 911 Carrera convertible to drive anymore, but a friend of mine loaned me his Rambler station wagon, which was about 12 years old and had one working window. So, humility began to eke its way into my life. So no, it wasn't a quietly transitional thing. It was kind of like, if this doesn't happen by this date. I mean, I can remember going to work. It was the Monday after the Super Bowl in January of 1991. And having the CFO walk up to me and go, "This is really not good. This is really not good." And we sat down and tried to figure out how and what we were going to do, because the economy at that time was contracting anyway. So, but this just, it's kind of like I've contracted my company as much as humanly possible and everything was going along good. And then all of a sudden, having to repay this debt would have completely wiped out our cash reserves. So it was, no matter what I do, we're closed. And having a bank auction walk through your building and auction off entire rows of a warehouse for what's probably $20,000 of the stuff for $1,500, for when they went in my office and sold my desk and my chair and my lighting and my artwork. Those are things that'll sort of realize that maybe this is not the right path. And all along the way, the things that I had put focus on, boards of directors, chambers of commerce, service clubs, all these other things, I heard from none of these people. None of them called. None of them said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear this. How can we help you?" The only people that called me were the people I had ignored for the previous 10 years, which was my family. And so the people that I had ignored were the people who were there. So that's why when I started over, I realized a different set of principles has to be here. So no, it was pretty much from January 1st, 1991 to April 1st, 1991, the bank came in and sort of worked its way through. And then, well, basically, they didn't take the company. They gave me the company back with all the debt. They just took all the assets out and then walked off. They even bounced the sales tax check for December. And we did, $1 million of the sales in December. And in Virginia, it was, in those days, I think it was 4%. So 4% of $1 million, and the state of Virginia just got their hand up going, "Okay, John, could you send me a check for that?" Because the bank just basically went, "Sue us. We don't care."
Sure.
And so it was a very humbling experience, and not something that I had experienced in a long time. Was this idea of humility had kind of washed itself away, protected by this sort of shell of hubris that had taken over.
Well, I commend the way that you handle that, because I think there's kind of perhaps two ways that could have went. Obviously the path that you were on, or you could have taken that and it could have destroyed, your future that you potentially had. And it seems like you made, the clear choice for yourself, and you learned from that experience and use that as a way to grow, as opposed to an opportunity to get mad at somebody, to feel cut down or belittled, even though that's what had to happen in order for you to grow and expound. Now, you talked about your book. Your book is The Daily Six, and you outline 6 simple concepts for creating positive change. And can you perhaps walk us through some of these principles and how maybe an individual or even organization can use that to better their well-being or even productivity?
Sure. The book was originally written as sort of an individual self-help book, and that's what it won an award for, self-help personal, because I really wasn't thinking about it as a corporate change book, even though it sort of began quickly to morph into that. But the 6 concepts are willingness, because if you're not willing, nothing will change. Willingness is oil in the engine. If you don't have willingness, then that's why. A lot of times when I'm talking to clients, I say, "Why don't New Year's resolutions last?" And it's a combination of lack of willingness and fear. I'm going in a direction, even though it's healthy, I don't really know where I'm doing over here, and I'm not really willing to go through a level of uncomfortability to get there. So I end up back on old behavior again. So willingness is key to be number 1 for me. And actually, I've been wearing this bracelet probably for not this bracelet, but I've been wearing a willingness bracelet, which is this, for ever since the book came out. And it reminds me that, if I'm not willing to be open-minded, to find new teachers, to keep growing, to keep learning, then I'm just stagnating, period. There's I forget, maybe it was Zig Ziglar or Jack Canfield, or one of the old gurus I shouldn't say old because I'm an old guy now, but it was one of these things here. You're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, because the world is moving forwards. So there's no standing still. If you're standing still, you're moving backwards. So willingness was important for me to keep me moving. And so the number 2 is quiet time. And if you want to be religious or spiritual about that, it can be prayer, it could be meditation, it could be carburetor repair. I don't really care what it is, as long as it allows you to quiet your mind. I know people who knit, and I can't knit, but I can meditate. And so, and that takes time. I mean, for me, I was this crazy double A type personality style. For me to sit quietly in a corner somewhere for more than 30 seconds was impossible. So, and a friend said, and if in the book, there's three guys that I sort of dedicated the book to, and it was three people who taught me different components of what the six ended up being. And one of the guys was just this guy who was always joyful, happy. If he was in a crowd, there was like 10 people standing around him, listening to him talk. And he's the one who said, if you start each day sort of reflecting on the day that you would like to have and think about how you would like to move it from a concept into a reality, meditation is the process. So I started doing that and worked it up from about 10 seconds to about half an hour over a period of about a year. And that's been a wonderful lifesaver for me when I'm stressed or something else. Nowadays, it doesn't take anything to get my mind to quiet down because I've been at it forever. But I can, like I did that this morning. I was walking my dog and we go out early and the dog runs around loose in the park and I just kind of walk around in the park and it gives me a chance to sort of pay attention to life beside, look this way instead of looking this way all the time. And I know this is only an audio, so look, outward, not just always be focused on what's going on in here, but also pay attention to what's going on outside my physical body. And so that's willingness and quiet time. So if you have to start with willingness, then set your mind and your heart in the right direction, which is what quiet time will do. Set your heart and your mind in the right direction. If you do that, your life will follow. So number 3 is service to others, focusing on the needs of others rather than just on my needs. And it's funny how you take somebody who's mostly spent his life focused on being the lead dog or, those old routines you hear, only the front dog gets a decent view and you've got to be at the top of the chain only to find out that a lot of that really is just BS because that's what they learned in the 20s and then they learned that in the 40s and then they learned that in the 60s. And, it just didn't quite, it seemed to me that emotional intelligence before Goleman's book came out, it was connecting with people on an emotional level was much more powerful than connecting with people on a controlling level, which is how the leadership worked when I was coming up. Leadership was basically controlling, telling you and controlling you versus encouraging you and asking you. And so number 3 is service, focusing on the needs of others and not worrying about whether that benefits me or not, just focusing on the needs of others. Number 4 is love and forgiveness. And I've always thought of love and forgiveness as sort of two sides of the same coin. You can't really be loving unless you're forgiving, and you can't be forgiving unless you're being loving. And love is just, the phrase I used in the book is understanding the needs of others and treating those needs as important as if they were mine. That's it. And so when I do that, it doesn't matter if it's a customer, a sister, a brother, a parent, a child, a spouse. If I treat their needs as important as my own, it doesn't matter who they are. It connects me on a much deeper level than not paying attention. And then forgiveness is just simply giving up all hope of having a different yesterday. I can't change yesterday, but I can carry all the resentment and anger into today. But it really screws up today if I bring all the past stuff forward. So forgiveness really, and one of the things when I've worked with clients, I've had people say, well, I just can't forgive them for this. I just can't let that go. And that's what you were talking about, how you sort of got past the bank. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it took me some time to sort of let this go. But the faster you can let go of things, and this is sort of one of the Buddhism issues of non-grasping, not hanging on to things, whether with Buddhism, it's good or bad, just live and move forward. And the more that you can let go of negativity, the better it is for you. When I'm focusing on forgiveness with a client, the idea is that it's good for the client. If I'm forgiving somebody else and they don't accept it, that's okay with me because I'm trying to clear up my side of the street here. And if they accept it, great. If they don't accept it, I want to make sure I can go to sleep tonight because I've done everything I can to smooth out everything in between us. And so that's what forgiveness does for me. Number 5 is gratitude. Being grateful for all things at all times, including having the bank come in and shut your company down. So it's, and it took a while before I could say, wow, that was really a good idea. And this is the issue I have with people. I say, well, tell me about your gift of devastation. Well, I got fired from my job. And then I said, well, then what happened? Well, I had to move home with my parents. And well, then what happened? Well, I got this other job and it was really a great job. And then I got there and I met the woman I fell in love with. And then I got married. And I said, so in other words, if this hadn't happened, none of this would have happened. Exactly. I'm thinking, well, then that's not a bad thing. So maybe you should be grateful that you lost that job or filed for bankruptcy or ended up having to move across the country to take care of an old relative or something. If we can embrace life as it comes to us, we can live a much more positive way. And then number 6 is simply action. It is, okay, these are great concepts, but if we don't do something about them, then nothing's going to change. You can have all the intention you want, but if it doesn't work itself into some sort of action, then all you've got is intention. And so a friend of mine used to say that people judge us on our behavior, not on our intentions of behavior. And so for me, it was critically important that I not think about kindness or caring or supportive. It's that I actually became those things. And so I started a simple practice of how to take intentions. In the quiet time in the morning, I would set intentions. And then as I go through the day, I would practice reminding myself of the intentions. Because what usually happens is just like New Year's resolutions. By March, everybody's given them up. And with intentions, we set a good intention in the morning. By 10 o'clock, somebody, we've been in traffic and it's pissed us off, and we've talked to somebody on the phone and we're angry about that. And the intentions just kind of, go away. So how do we keep that in our minds? And for me, when initially it was, I actually set alarms on my phone every 20 or 30 minutes. How are you doing with that idea of being inclusive today, or being kind today, or thinking about calling your parents today, or whatever it might be? And then as I began to practice that, it just became daily behavior. Like anything else, if you practice it, it will become a habit. So,
all right. So
that's the daily.
I have a question, and then I have a couple of points that I really liked about those. My question is, are those 6 points, those 6 areas, are they arranged in a particular order, or are they just there?
Yes.
A little both. Okay.
Okay. I've had friends of mine, when I first wrote them out, before I wrote the book, I had a little card, just had 6 components on it. And she said she put the card on her refrigerator every day and went over and looked at the card and said, I'm going to work on love and forgiveness today, or I'm going to work on quiet time today. So she was just working on the concepts in an arbitrary way. And it seemed to work great for her. She said it got me through a divorce. It got me through, this, that, and the other thing. And I was fantastic. For me, the idea is it's kind of like cracking that hubris shell. For me, it really does sort of need to be in a process of being willing to start and then setting my intention right with my heart and my mind through quiet time. Then really the only components of change are service, love and forgiveness, and gratitude. And then action is doing something about these ideas. So love and forgiveness, service, and gratitude are kind of just the idea of kindness, being nice, and finding ways to do that. So for me, I have to set the table and then eat the meal, and then remember to clean the plates and start over again, and just keep this process going. So for me, I have a version of the Daily Six that I've rewritten called "How the Daily Six Works at Work," and it's how do each of these components fit into a workplace. Because, people want to feel connected. And in the 20 years or so since I wrote the book, the idea of having an engaged workforce is really important. And yet people try to do that without emotion. And I said, well, what's the difference between a couple and an engaged couple. The only difference is emotion.
So some of the things that you said that I really resonated with were you set the reminders on your phone, and that's such a wonderful way. That's something I do personally, and we've talked about this before, and it's such an overlooked thing. And for me, the way that I do that is I went through a process of defining my values, and then for each of the values, I dedicated a affirmation to each of those. And on different days, at different times of those days, I have a reminder on my phone that'll go off, and it'll tell me that affirmation on those specific times where I know that I'm in that area that I value. And that was so beneficial. I heard that, and again, such an easy thing to do, but it's often overlooked and not talked about. And the other thing that I really resonate is you mentioned practices, not habits. You did mention habits; they become habits later on, but practices, and that's something that we have talked about on the show previously. That daily practices are so important because, so a little background about who we are. We're martial arts instructors and have been doing that I've been doing it since 99, and so a length of time. And so practice for me is something that I understand. That's a word that resonates with me. And practice, despite what they say, practice doesn't make perfect. And perfect practice also doesn't make perfect, because perfect isn't something that it's not a box that humans can fit into. Right. And practice makes progress, perhaps, but practice makes permanent, really, is how I interact with that. And the way you practice something is the way that it's going to be performed. And by thinking about those instead of habits as a practice, then that brings the intention of it's something that I have to continually do. It's habits have a crafty way of formulating in your brain. You do it a handful of times and it just happens on accident. You don't even know it's No, that's not to my experience, that's not how those things happen. There has to be a practice, a daily practice that I commit to and I'm going to strive forward with. And so hearing you talk about those things really, again, that really resonates with me and how I interact with my daily activities, because practice is really we are what we practice. We are what we repeat. And those daily practices are so important to that.
Right. It's the phrase that I use in keynotes is practice to permanence. That's what you need to do, because it will become a habit, but it's going to be uncomfortable. It's interesting. I was just getting ready to write an article about this. I don't know if you've ever seen a success curve plotted out, but it always starts at, say, on a scale of, how successful you are goes up, because I just started, I'm very excited, and then it starts to tank almost immediately and goes down to a point. But if you keep at it, as it's going down, it starts to turn and come back up again. And I was looking at Kubler-Ross. She has her 6 stages of grief or whatever it was. I've kind of forgotten that. I used to study that, but I haven't in a long time. But I was looking at an image of it, and it's exactly the same thing. You start out and you feel terrible, and then you really tank out. And then all of a sudden you keep going through it and you start coming out the other end. So for me, anything you want to do, you've got to realize there's going to be a real big dead spot. There's going to be a real big dead spot in between getting excited and starting and being successful and continuing. And it just takes a commitment to realize it and then push through it. But if you sort of assume, well, I'm going to start eating well and I'm never going to eat badly again, or I'm going to exercise today and I'm always going to exercise today. And it's just like, if I'm going to meditate and pray every day or whatever it is you want to do, that's great. But you're might miss on Thursday or Friday. Don't quit forever. Just pick it up and start going. And it's the same thing with negative stuff. Well, I ate things I shouldn't eat. Okay, fine. Then pick up tomorrow and start working on it. That's why I refer to it as the daily 6, because it really is a daily reminder of the things that we need to keep ourselves open to, so that we can be of service to the life that we've been given.
Yeah, very good. That's so cool how we resonate with that. With your kind of the second book talked about in the daily 6 in business. With that, how what strategies can businesses use to cultivate a more positive and engaging culture, and how does that factor in with the individual well-being as well?
Okay. Well, for me, individual well-being is first. You can't stand up in front of 300 people and talk about trust me. It just doesn't happen like that. I mean, the article I wrote just said trust is the final step towards success. It isn't the first step towards success. It takes a number of other components to get there. First, you have to be, and again, if you follow the daily six stuff, you have to be consistent and consistent to your word. I'm sure you've read the 4 agreements, and being honest to your word and being genuine. So, to me, each individual person has to be brought along, but that in an organization they can be brought along by the leadership's consistency and willingness to be uncomfortable. Most of the time when I have to work with an organization, it's getting the leadership, not so much the people want to connect. The people want to be successful. I've said that for years and years and years. The people who work for you want to be successful. You are just not allowing them to be successful because either they don't feel comfortable asking you a question, or they don't feel comfortable questioning something that they're doing that they think they could be doing better or faster or smarter. And they're just not willing to come and talk to you. So you have to find a way to be more open. And I said, the way that you do that, in my mind, is ask more questions instead of giving more orders. Ask more questions. Well, how do you think this might work? Or how do you think this would work better? Give me some ideas about how to shorten the turnaround on this. The people who do the work understand how to do the work better than the people who supervise the work. And that I've been saying since I was running a company back in the 80s. If you want to ask how to get the truck drivers back faster, ask the truck drivers. Don't ask the warehouse manager. So ask the people. Don't tell the people. When I'm in an organizational training program, I usually say, how many people here have ever had a brand new process or training program or something created by the people above you and then dropped on you without any explanation or notice that it was coming? And of course, everybody raises their hand. Everybody raises their hand. Or how many people in here have had a chance where the person said, trust me on this, and then they violated that trust, and everybody raises their hand. So it isn't that hard. It just requires you to do something, just like with the Daily Six. It just requires you to do something that it was not taught in business school, which is to be willing to be vulnerable, to be honest at almost any level. I mean, I do believe at some point you could even share financial statements with the people that you work with, so they know how strong you are, or they know where your needs are. But you have to do that with the people that you have an absolute level of trust with. But you're talking about organizations. The thing that's important about an organization is that if you don't do this, if you don't find a way to create a connection, an emotional connection, if you want engagement, there has to be an emotional connection. If you want inclusion and connection with your people, there has to be an emotional connection. You can't have a sense of inclusion in an organization where there's no emotion. Inclusion is an emotional feeling. It's a feeling of being included, a sense of building a community. And once you have a community built, you have a common focus. Everybody is focusing in the same directions. And it's just like a magnifying glass. If you put a magnifying glass on your profits, they will grow. If you put a magnifying glass on the happiness and joy of your people, they will grow. And so actually we have a friend of mine, and we did 3 other people and myself came out with a new book last year called People Come First. It's it's sort of a business guide for the new millennium. And the idea was, if you focus on your people, the profits will take care of themselves. And the thing that's important, and as I was saying originally, is that if you don't do this, what will happen is the people who have opportunities, which are your best people, those are the people who have opportunities. They're getting calls to change jobs. They're getting calls to move up in another position. If you haven't built an organization that holds on to those people and values those people, they will leave because they have an opportunity to leave. And what you will be ending up with is everybody who has no opportunity to go anywhere because nobody else wants them and they work for you. So now you're going to have a whole company full of average to below average performers, which is absolutely not what you want. So it is really important to sort of set this ego aside and set this, I don't have ulcers, I give them. It's like, please don't ever say that to anybody. And it's just really, it's a weird feeling that when you begin to ask people, how are you feeling, and really mean it? How are you doing? Well, how's that sister of you? Remembering little details about the person and the connections to the company and to you. And the more you do that, the more you invest in time, then the people who are actually doing the work, because you're probably, if you're a CEO of a company, you're not doing a lot of the work on a daily basis that makes profits. Your work is the relationships with the people who work there. That's what you should be focusing on. The future and the relationships with the people who work with you. And that's all. If you do that, the profits will take care of themselves.
Well, and, I think probably the best way to make those connections with the people is through communication. And, effective communication really is vital in all aspects of life. How does positive communication help to reduce the stress and enhance relationships? And again, how does that impact that individual and their well-being?
Well, I think a sense of positive well-being is something that's very hard to say is anything other than positive for somebody. If they're feeling good about themselves and they're feeling like as if I'm appreciated and I'm respected and I'm valued, then there's a positive sense of success that continues to. This is what one of the phrases that I use in the How the Daily Six Works at Work is, that it creates a cycle of success that repeats itself day in and day out. This kind of behavior. And it's important if you can get into a group setting in an organization, team meeting or whatever it is, and instead of being at the front of the room, be a member of the audience and let somebody else lead the meeting and let that cycle around. Let somebody else feel most important. Do things like, I remember when this was a long time ago, when I told people about doing it, they're like, you do what? Which was sending a letter home to the family, thanking them for allowing me to hold them late at night or work them on a Saturday or whatever. And I knew I was impacting the family and this, that, and the other thing. And it was an amazing reaction that you were talking about a sense of value and a sense of personal value and self-worth. The person comes in after the husband or the wife says, oh my gosh, I got this letter today. And they're just praising how you work and how hard you're doing and then thanking me and that person shows up for work tomorrow. They're not upset about anything. They're walking down the hall, skipping and humming to themselves. And the thing is, it doesn't take much. I've been in offices before where literally a Post-it note is framed and hanging on the wall next to a computer screen because it's a note that the boss sent a note and said, thanks very much. You helped us a lot on the McKinsey project or whatever it is, and stuck it on the computer. And that's the only thing they ever have received in the entire 10 years they worked there. So they stuck it in a thing and hung it on a wall so that they can remind themselves that they're important. So what we need to do, this is not as hard as it seems because most people don't do it. Most people don't do it. So you can look like a genius just by saying thank you, just by acknowledging people on a personal level, not just on an organizational level. It's when no one else is doing it, you can look like a genius.
Well, and that's something that's so difficult, even with parents, is because the bosses, the managers, the parents, they are looking for the nail, like I think it's a Japanese proverb, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And
Mhm.
they're looking for the negative. And of course, when you're looking for that, that's what you're going to find. And you're always going to be
Right.
in that type of mode of thinking. You're looking for the negative, you're finding negative, and you're always reprimanding people. But if you can shift, you're right,
Right.
almost nobody does that. If you can shift to the positive things and be grateful for your team or your kids or your family for the things that they're doing, oh my gosh, that goes so far because nobody does it. And you could be that one person that makes such a big
Right.
change in that person's life because instead of
Exactly.
only focusing on the negative, you found the positive for them.
Right. And with an organization, what you really should be doing is teaching your people, not you, but your people, to look for the negative and let them find it and let them fix it. And then you can praise the people who found the negative. And so it turns the whole concept completely around, that you as leadership are not focusing on the negative, you're focusing on the positive, because the people who work for you and are on the front lines, they're looking for those little nails that are sticking up and they're hammering them down. And in the next week's meeting, you can say, Jim, thanks a lot for finding that nail and hammering it down because you made a big difference. And so we just had the wrong level of organizational observation, that we were letting the executives hammer down the nails, and the nails are problems. They're not people.
Right.
And we were hammering down on the people. And so what happens to the problems? They just stay there or get worse, because the last time I raised my hand, I got in trouble. I'm never raising my hand again. I can't tell you how many times people have said that to me. I learned my lesson, never doing that again.
Yeah.
And that's not people saying, every time I go to him, things get better. Every time we talk, I feel better about the relationship. And that's how you want your people to feel. And like I said, even after working on this for 20 years, I talk to people and it's like, wow, they don't do anything like that where I work. And I think, so how hard is this, especially with a smaller company? Large companies have no chance. I guess they have some chance of success, but it is the level of diffusion of authority is so spread out in a large organization. It's really hard to make a positive change. But in a small, less than a couple of hundred employees, it's really very easy. Well, that's not true. It's very uncomfortable, but it's not hard. You just have to be willing to be uncomfortable. That's what I say if you want to create change, this is why willingness is so important. You have to realize new behavior is uncomfortable. All new behavior is uncomfortable, even if it's good behavior. If you start eating healthier, that tastes different than going to McDonald's. It's just, it's a different expectation, and it's going to feel weird doing it. It's like asking questions instead of telling people what to do. It's connecting on an emotional level instead of just an intellectual level. These are all different behaviors, but they're good behaviors. And we have to be willing to sort of struggle through that success curve we were talking about before, push through, get to the other side, and have it start becoming more and more successful. And all of a sudden, I think success is the most addictive drug in the world, because so few people really have a sense of what success feels like. If you give them a chance to feel successful, they want to come back and get that feeling again and again and again. And the only person that holds them back from that is the leadership. Leadership holds the people back from trying for things, because when they try and they don't succeed and you hammer that nail down, they're not trying anymore.
Well, and if you can have your employees see the problems and you empower them to be able to fix the problems, then you have created a team of problem solvers that's your staff. And then that way, when they come to you, they say, hey, here's the problem. Here's the fix that I implemented. And you're thinking, oh, wow, that's a big problem. Oh, you've fixed the problem already. Wow, that's amazing. You are, I truly believe in always trying to work yourself out of a job. And if you can empower the people below you to find the problems, to fix those problems, you are doing exactly that. And not only will they succeed for that, you will succeed for that. And the overall business will be so much different than any of your other competitions, because you have a team of problem solvers, and that is the culture that your business identifies with.
Right. When you get to a point where you have people problem solving and then letting you know it's been fixed, your job as a leader is just get everything out of their way. That's all. Just get all the roadblocks out of their way and let them go. make sure they got plenty of food and coffee and breaks and whatever else, and then just watch them go. Because they trust you. They know that if they try something and it doesn't work, that you'll help them figure out how to get it back on track. And the thing that's really important is that has to also, if I'm a middle manager and I've got my people doing this, like you said, I want to work myself out of a job. If I'm a middle manager and I'm fearful that I am working myself out of a job, because what am I actually doing as far as the guy above me goes? The guy above me has to believe that too, or otherwise I'm going to keep my thumb on the throat of the people who underneath me, because I've got to prove my value. This is what happens when new people come in. I've had clients come in and screw stuff up just so they could fix it, so they looked great because they were new on the job. So it's like create chaos so I can solve chaos. But if you're in a smallish company, a couple hundred employees or smaller, you're the leader pretty much, or you're the next to the leader. And so that kind of an environment can be created reasonably easily over probably less than a year. You can get to a point where you're going from pounding down the nail to people self-solving and moving forward.
So, okay, so you've have experience in starting companies and running them, and then doing another one, and even helping companies. If you were to come into the company, okay, this is a multi-part question. Number one, what would be the key warning signs that would be something that would be worrisome, like the red flags? What would be some, like, let's say, give me 3 red flags that you come into the company, right away, boom, 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 those are negative things. And then what on the flip side of that, you go into the company, what are the 3 green signs that you say, well, these guys are on track, they're and maybe those people probably wouldn't hire you to come in and help them their business, but what would be the those 2 corresponding sides?
Well, the 3 things that seem to me to pop up is absenteeism and turnover, and attitude, not worker attitude, leadership attitude. Are they talking about asking questions, or are they talking about telling them what to do? What's the control issue associated with leadership? And then, of course, what I would end up doing is what works best in trying to create change in an organization is talking to leadership, and then talking to the people who are actually in charge. You go to the next level down, it might not be the VP, it might be, it's not the lieutenant, it's the staff sergeant that really is in charge, kind of thing. So you go find that person and you work with that person to get the changes made. So that's the positive side of it, is making sure that you find the right person. Don't just use an arbitrary cookie cutter version of change. Because if you go in and you just talk to the CEO and then all of the other VPs on the way down, you could end up with 6 VPs that aren't going to trust the idea of being emotionally engaged, because they've tried it. Because anytime you hire somebody, not only are you hiring them to work with you, but you're also hiring all of the old baggage from every employer, every employer's culture that they have ever had before. Whether they've ever trusted, whether they've been violated in that trust, whether they've been, bullied, any of these things. If you're hiring all of that along, and so your job, if you want to create change, is to find a way to talk this through with the people who are critically important and teach them how to deal with this stuff. Again, sometimes it can be as simple as the daily 6. But emotional intelligence is such a critically important component, especially with younger workers. Younger workers don't want to be told what to do. They want to be asked input. They want to give input, whether they know or not know. They want to give input, and they want it to be appreciated. And so that's not hard for a leadership component, manager, leader who's willing to listen and not be critical. No eye rolling. No tut-tutting, no, I used to do a humorous sketch about, and your people can't see me, but when the person comes in the office and somebody's working on their computer and they say, just sit down, go ahead, tell me what's important, tell me what's going on, because it's really important to me, but they never look up from the computer and they just keep clicking on the keyboard. I guarantee you this person is not concerned about anything other than, I am definitely not as important as whatever is going on with that computer. So you have to learn silly little things. I mean, I used to teach this in retail, how to get people to stand at a counter and not be angry by being ignored, but welcome them and tell them that they're important and tell them to just be a minute. I'll be right with you. That's all you have to do. And it's the same with people who are working in a normal organizational environment. You have to be willing to listen to them, but you also have to have the skill sets to be able to say, well, now how do I, this guy is being honest with me. This woman's being straightforward with me as far as how she's feeling and what's caused. How do I respond to that? So if you don't have those skills, or you haven't ever tried to work on those skills, in many cases, it's not common sense. In many cases, it's something that you really have to work on to realize, no, what I would be saying here would be criticism, and what I need to be is supportive. And so these are sometimes things that are as far from common sense. At least for me, it was that way. I mean, I had to really focus on what I'm hearing rather than what I am imagining is going on in my head. Because what I'm imagining, I used to imagine the answer while the other person's talking. And I realized that if somebody gives me an answer immediately when I finish talking, they weren't listening. They were thinking up an answer. So, as managers, we have to be willing to, sort of disconnect our brain a little bit and honestly listen to what's going on. Listen, not just with your eyes and your ears, but with your heart, and see if you can sort of hear the underlying message that's going on here. Is this person genuinely sad? Is this person, are they angry? I've had people who sound angry and they're really sad. I've had people who sound sad and they're really fearful. But I wouldn't know that if I didn't take a few extra minutes to sort of qualify what that is. And I guarantee you, every time I've ever done that, it has been worth it 100 times over, because of the level, like I said, absenteeism and turnover evaporate. People want to come to work. They like coming to work. It's the first time they've ever had a job where they felt like they were a part of the success of the organization, not just an unacknowledged cog in the wheel, another brick in the wall, thanks to Pink Floyd.
Well, John, what a wonderful conversation that we had today. Your insights, your experiences are truly inspiring. Thank you for joining us here. Do you have any closing remarks or takeaways for our listeners?
I would say that, well, first of all, if you want to see I have lots of videos, and I have a whole chapter. The first chapter of the book is online. The book is available, I think, on Scribble, Skribl. The book and the audio book and the electronic book are available either for free or almost for like $1 or something. I mean, they do a great job of keeping it very, very inexpensive. I have it on Amazon as well, but I don't want to not say Amazon, because they certainly send me a lot more money than Scribble does. But it's a very inexpensive. It's a great book place, but it's a great place to get things that are a little bit more affordable for everybody. But between the videos and the material, the key is to be willing to be uncomfortable with new behavior and be willing to find new teachers to teach us. If you're not comfortable with where you are today, find a new teacher, because you can't fix this with this. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't see me, can you? You can't fix, I keep thinking you can see me. You can't fix your brain with your brain. It's your brain that got you here today. If you're in trouble, your brain brought you here. Find somebody else to sort of guide you out of that. That's why I think coaching has finally gotten some credibility. 20 years ago or 35 years ago, when I was trying to find a coach, there weren't around. There just weren't any. And I was running a company that kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I had no idea how to run it, So coaching is very helpful, or mentoring is very helpful if you have it in your organization. But yeah, I think if you do things on a daily basis that help you move from a position of sort of guessing to a position of understanding, and the willingness to take the time to get to know the people who work with you on a level that's not just, hey, how you doing, kind of thing. And there's lots of information on my website, or any of my connections on social media. Most of them just circle around my name, John Chappelear. That's my website. That's most of the social media stuff. So, or people can just reach out if they want. I mean, I'm perfectly happy responding to people who send me an email or send me a text. Well, not a text message, but an email. I get back to people pretty quickly, unless I'm traveling, but usually within a day or two. Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. And I'll be sure to put all your links in the description for this episode as well. That way, if anybody wanted to reach out, they could find you. And you have several videos up on YouTube as well. Is that right?
Yes, I have probably 30 or 40 videos on YouTube.
Wonderful.
And I'm going to start creating some new ones starting next week. I've got ideas, and I've started laying out the ideas, and now I know what to say when I turn on the camera.
Very good. Well, listeners, if you found our episode today valuable, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it. Remember, it's not just about success. It's about creating significance in your life and the lives of others. Join us next time for more inspiring conversations. Remember, stay prestigious.